The Projection Booth podcast is sponsored by Scarecrow Video. Try out Scarecrow's rent-by-mail service. Choose from over 150,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door. Visit scarecrow.com today.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
What city, please?
Like I'm in Hollywood and I want to report a murder.
I'm Detective Sergeant Lloyd Hopkins with the police department. It's about Julie Niemeyer.
Actually, I was thinking about calling you guys. No, I just didn't know what to say.
Why'd you kill her?
There's a dangerous man on the loose.
All I care about is stopping this maniac before he kills again. Do you understand? Come on, Dutch. You'll blow away a broad's date. The least you can do is drive her home.
His boss thinks he's trouble.
If you go to the media, I'll crucify you.
You had a bad day, didn't you?
How can you tell?
You always shake just a little.
His friends think he's crazy.
A 1-day suspended from the force, breaking and entering, robbery, and now possible murder. What do you got lined up for tonight?
Women think he's a menace.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Try to think of a 3-letter word for explosive.
You're a cop. You gotta take me in.
Well, there's some good news and there's some bad news.
Get up!
The good news is you're right, I'm a cop and I gotta take you in. The bad news is I've been suspended and I don't give a
Cop. James Woods in the most startling performance of his career with Leslie Ann Warren and Charles Durning. When a man cares too much, how far is too far?
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Join me once again is Mr. Rod Lott.
Innocence kills, Jan.
Also back in the booth is Mr. Andrew Nette.
You blow away a broad's date, the least you can do is drive her home.
We wrap up Noirvember with a request from Dallas Novell, Cop. Released in 1988, the film was the first time James Ellroy's fiction was adapted for the big screen, adapted by writer-director James B. Harris. The film stars James Woods as Detective Lloyd Hopkins, a genius super cop who stumbles onto a mystery 18 years in the making. We will be spoiling the film, as well as Ellroy's original source novel, Blood on the Moon, as well as other things as we go along. So if you don't want anything ruined, turn off the podcast and come back after you've seen the movie, read the book, etc., etc. We will still be here. So, Rod, when was the first time you saw Cop, and what did you think?
I saw it first when it came out, actually, in theaters at the nearest theater to my house, which was a little place called French Market Mall Twin Cinemas in Oklahoma City. I think it shut down a year later, but mall is a not exactly the right word for it. It's just a small indoor, maybe 24 stores total. It was designed to look like New Orleans, kind of, so it's very strange. But the theater was on its last legs at that point. And I think, let's see, that was like 88. So I would have been 17 at the time. I was going to a lot of movies since I had a driver's license. Corralled my brother into it, telling him it was going to be just like Above the Law with Steven Seagal. It wasn't. He didn't care for that comparison. But I remembered liking it, but I didn't love it. And I wasn't sure exactly how to interact with it, because at that point I hadn't seen a cop movie quite like this, which I'm sure we'll get into. At the time, I was kind of a fan of James Woods, not today necessarily, but he was on a really good run at that late 80s with the B-level modestly budget, well-reviewed, but underperforming thrillers like this. True Believer with Robert Downey Jr., bestseller written by Larry Cohen. And this, I think, is the best of those. I was also a big fan of Randy Brooks, who's in this briefly, but for very different reasons. Yeah, I liked it. This is the fourth time I've seen it, and I think it's probably the best of those viewings because, being middle-aged now, as opposed to all the previous other times, I picked up a lot more on it than I have ever before.
And Andrew, how about yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. When did I first see Cop? And I can't remember. It was a long time ago, maybe back in the early 90s. I can't remember. I liked it then. I must have watched it 4 or 5 times since then. As my opinion, I wrote something for this website that was, I don't think it exists anymore. It was called Back Alley Noir. And and I wrote an article where I said that it was, I think, the best Ellroy adaptation. And by that, I don't mean the best film, but the best film that had actually channeled Ellroy's spirit and work and essential nastiness. And I still think that was quite controversial, that post. I think someone even had to pull in, what was his name, Eddie Muller, because of course there's only one person who really knows anything about noir in the entire world, and that's Eddie. So what does Eddie think about, this view that Cop is the best Ellroy adaptation, et cetera, et cetera? I still think it's great. Woods drunk deep the Marga Kool-Aid, but let's for a moment separate the art from the artist. He was amazing in the 80s and in the early 90s, just a run of incredible films. We can talk about that. He's fantastic. He's kind of like the original Bad Lieutenant in this, I think, and I have read the book. I didn't get around to reading it this time. I like the book. I like the Lloyd Hopkins books. This time around, I was probably a little bit more critical of the movie, but I still think it works, and it's just got a narrative drive that I just think is really, really just pushes away all the stuff in the film that doesn't work. It's also a completely, it's how to make a 1980s crime film. Have seen it a number of times, still think it's a great film.
Yeah, I don't remember the first time that I saw this. I want to say it might have been when I was in college. I definitely watched it post LA Confidential at one point, and I imagine that person who is going off on you was probably thinking LA Confidential, which I can see your point. That's probably the best movie that's loosely based on an Ellroy book, but it is not the best adaptation. I mentioned when we talked about LA Confidential that the book and the movie are so completely different, but they are both genius. And this, I do agree, it really does capture that mean-spiritedness, that almost apocalyptic vision of LA that Ellroy really, mines every single time he goes to his typewriter. It's also kind of a good thing. I mean, Lloyd Hopkins in the book is a little bit of a bigger person, not quite a Jack Reacher type of a person, but he's a bigger guy. Woods is not a shrimp by any means. And also, Lloyd Hopkins in the book is purported by many people to be a genius. And James Woods, yes, despite his politics, is literally a genius. I think he's a Mensa member, very super smart guy. And it makes sense that he plays this character who's both incredibly slimy, which Woods pulls off every single time he wants to be a bad guy on screen,
or even every single film he's made, just about.
Pretty much every single film he's made, whether he's, the hero in Videodrome or, the secret bad guy in something like The Specialist or something. He's always slimy, which I really like about him. I mean, his small turn in something like Night Moves, he's perfect in that. And he's great in this as far as he wants to uphold the law, but he will do anything that it takes to uphold the spirit rather than the actual literal law that is going on. He is very much that cop outside of the police department. He is given carte blanche a lot of times by his superiors because he is so smart and he can go out and figure these things out. He figures out that there's a serial killer and no one else on the entire force of many, many different police departments was able to put that stuff together, but he is. And I think that the casting of Woods as Lloyd Hopkins really just fit very perfectly his persona and his demeanor.
it's interesting because I've always liked James Woods as an actor, but the character itself, and I had not read the book until we were prepping for this, how unlikable the character is, but he has to walk that line of playing an unlikable character while still being just likable enough for the audience to be on his side, because you still root for him despite him being just a terrible person. That's not easy to do.
And he did it so effortlessly in so many films.
I don't know how he does it, but it's not easy to do.
James B. Harris, too, is a really interesting filmmaker. I mean, not a huge but has done some really interesting films, I think. And I was reading somewhere, because he worked with Kubrick too, so serious lineage there. And he learned his craft from Kubrick. And I was reading that, what did he learn from Kubrick? And it's like, casting is 85% of the film. If you cast the right people, they're disciplined, they know their lines, and they're great actors, you're going to get a lot of help. I mean, he learned some other things from Kubrick too, but I think that's the Woods thing. Woods is Lloyd Hopkins, and he's so, to your point, Rod, he's so good in this, and he's so nasty, he's so venal, he's so sleazy. It's a terrible thing, but I still laugh every single. It's a terrible thing, but when trying to come on to the woman who's the feminist who owns the bookstore, he's just basically comes on to every single woman that he basically encounters quite successfully, it seems. He's so venal and sleazy, and it works.
I think it helps that he's not, he's a handsome guy, but he's not Cary Grant or anything like that. He's pockmarked, he has very thin lips. They sort of go diagonal every now and then. He's fallible. I think that does help the character. It makes him a little more relatable while he's doing these terrible, terrible things. James Woods, man, he was never better than late 80s to early 90s, I would say.
We've got Once Upon a Time in America, where he plays possibly one of the most disagreeable prohibition gangsters ever put on screen. He's got Salvador, which is great, which is terrific in. Bestseller, and I totally agree with you, Rod, that Bestseller is completely underrated film. It's such a good...
Anything with Larry Cohen touches is pretty much...
Yeah, but also Brian Dennehy is the cop, and this other guy as Cleve, the hitman, who wants him to write his sort of story, wants him to write his bio. Diggstown, that's a terrific... And, of course, come on, Lester Diamond in Casino. I mean, I could have done a whole Lester Diamond film.
I really like him in The Hard Way. It's
absolutely,
it's a silly film,
it's a
but
great
it
film.
Really works.
And don't you take that tone with me? Yeah, no, it's such a good film. Yeah, which is Woods taking the piss out of himself too. So the guy had a sense of humor once.
Lloyd Hopkins is just so morally flawed. And I love that the scene in Ellroy's book that really got to Harris, that made him want to do this as a movie, was when Hopkins comes home for the day and tells his little girl the whole story of the perp who was robbing these apartment buildings and all this. And he is not being he's not bowdlerizing the story at all. He's being very forthright with his little girl, and he has a huge argument with his wife about why protect your family, why protect women from knowing what's really going on out there.
Let me tell you something you should get through your head. They're all little girls, Jan. Every one of them. Every one of those pathetic souls who eventually does herself in is a little girl. Every neurotic who lies on a couch and pays some asshole good money to listen to her bullshit is a little girl. Every hooker out hustling her ass for a pimp who winds up with a dyke, a habit, or wasted by some psychopath is a little girl. And all these little girls have one thing in common. You know what that is? Disillusionment. And it always comes from the same thing. Expectations. The greatest woman killer of all time. A terminal disease that starts way back when they're all just little girls. When they're being fed all the bullshit about being entitled to happiness like it's a birthright. That's what you don't understand. When to stop perpetrating the myths that ruin their lives. Innocence kills, Jan. Believe me, it kills. I see it every fucking day of my life.
And really so much of this movie is about this idea of, do you live in this fantasy world or do you live in the real world? Hopkins is very much like, people should really live in the real world. I'm trying to prepare my daughter for what the world is giving me. You know, I'm the kind of person who can walk into a apartment building, open up a door and see a woman hanging there gutted, and still have the calm, cool collectedness to go through all of her things, light up a cigarette, and just wait for the rest of the cops to arrive while I riffle through everything and steal evidence, basically, because he knows this is the kind of person that I need to protect. This innocent person, very much like my daughter, is the kind of person I need to protect. And then you contrast that with Kathy, the Leslie Ann Warren character, who just lives in this whole fantasy world of poetry and journaling. And she seems to have made up this whole story about her court and all this stuff, even though, and we'll talk about her origin story versus his origin story versus the killer's origin story, because they definitely change those things around. I see it much more in the book as far as the fantasy world that she lives in, because that character, that Kathy, hasn't been raped.
That bedtime story thing, that's like the first high point in the movie for me. I remember that vividly from the first screening. Tell me how you got the scumbag, Daddy. That's a good line. And I'm glad that from the book, that girl's 12, which is way too old for a bedtime story or to be tucked in by Daddy or anything like that. So aging her down was perfect for that. Putting all three kids into one was a good idea. But that scene is incredible. And you mentioned him going into the apartment. He not only goes in, but he first tries to kick the door in and fails. And that's like, oh my gosh, this is like a non-movie movie, because cops can kick the doors down. Of course they can. This one cannot. He fails to do it. And I think that I remember that caught me off guard at first, and it still did this time. I completely forgot about it. And he also contaminates the crime scene by touching the doorknob. Like, he does all these things wrong. And he like even touches the doorknob after he sees blood seeping under the door with cockroaches stuck in it, which I do like, because that's not the kind of detail you normally get from these things. He's doing his job well, but also not well. He succeeds in spite of himself. He plays Johnny Law while breaking laws and breaking rules. And I like that dichotomy and just the whole, like you mentioned, the doubling, the contrast we get with all the characters. It's really interesting.
Kathleen, that's classic Ellroy, the feminist, his cliche of a feminist bookshop owner. I think that character is a bit weak, and I do think the serial killer, when he actually finds him, and the whole serial killer plot is very underbaked, I thought, this time. But again, the film has such an impressive narrative drive, and it's so well put together, and Woods carries it so well that it kind of pushes what are otherwise quite serious narrative failings in the story aside, and you kind of don't really notice them. It's as I say, it's taken me at least 5 viewings to notice that, that doesn't quite work. This, there's a problem with this, but I still think, and I probably was being more critical this time because I was watching the film with a purpose for a podcast, but I still think it works fantastically.
The one thing I noticed, and related to Leslie Ann Warren's character, when they're out on their, I guess you call it a date, and he talks about going by their old high school, and she's like, no, don't go there. I don't want anything to do with that place. And so then they go to her house, and she's going to take a bath before they're supposedly going to have sex. And what does he do? He reaches for what's on the coffee table. It's a high school yearbook, because of course, if you hated high school, you would just leave your high school yearbook out.
Sure.
That's the first time I noticed that was, and that's, it serves the plot. It gets you through faster. But yeah, that stuck out for me. I do I love Leslie Ann Warren as an actress, but I do think that part where she's introduced and they meet, it slows the movie down for me for about 15 to 20 minutes. It sort of shifts into a lower gear. It's not bad, but it definitely changes the speed of things. But it is at the midpoint in the movie, so I get why they did it.
But it's also about how absolutely venal Hopkins is as a character. She's telling him that terrible story about what she experienced at school, and he says, hey, look,
I got through the rape okay. I might as well go for the whole enchilada.
It's like he's got no sensitivity at all. He's just totally and she looks away and he looks at his watch and yawns. I mean, it's such a scumbag, such a complete scumbag.
That scene is fascinating just to watch his face, just to watch him while she's laying out that story. And Harris knows. Harris has that shot done so well to have her on the right side of the screen telling that very personal story, and to have him on the left side of the screen kind of facing us a little bit more, and we're just locked in. I'm just locked in on him more than her telling her horrific origin story. Yeah, I did write down the note that he what he says to his wife after he's been talking with his daughter, and he says, innocence is a terminal disease that starts way back when they're just little girls, when they're being fed all the bullshit about being entitled to happiness like it's a birthright. That's what you don't understand, when to stop perpetrating myths that ruin their lives. And I love that his little girl, she's got couple decorations on her wall, but one of them is a hand-drawn picture of a cop, basically, and it's just like, I'm surprised it doesn't say daddy underneath it. He's got his father figure with Dutch, the Charles Durning character.
Fantastic. Who's fantastic.
Oh, he's always wonderful. And I like that he gets 2 phone calls from Lloyd, basically like, I need your help covering up this shit. Like, both times I think he's just like, hey, yeah, I've done some bad things, or I've found this crime scene, but basically I want you to run this thing and, get going on this stuff. It's weird because he's very much a father figure, but at the same time, he is kind of a servant to Lloyd. Meanwhile, you've got Raymond J. Barry in here as Captain Fred Gaffney, who I think has a bigger role in the movie than he does the book. He just keeps showing up and basically upsetting things. And he's this big ultra Christian, which I found to be interesting, that it's his faith that really conflicts with what Lloyd does. Like, he knows how, we've mentioned the word venal, like he knows how venal Lloyd Hopkins is all the time. And he just does not approve of Hopkins just because he's running around on his wife all the time. And Durning also doesn't really, the Peltz character, Dutch Peltz, doesn't agree with that either, but he kind of lets that slide. Like, that's, Lloyd's one little problem that he has is that he sleeps around with other women all the time. And literally picks up a woman from a crime scene after he's just blown away her date.
And gets Dutch Schultz to do you tired, Dutch? Do you feel like doing the paperwork while I drive this woman home? He meets Kathleen and then he takes her to the cop party. It's just like absolutely no shame about anything, this guy, and there's that great scene with Julian Niemeyer, the woman who's sort of link in, is it Julian Niemeyer? Who is the woman, the slightly older woman? So Julian Niemeyer is the woman who was killed at the very beginning, I think. No, and then there's that woman who's kind of like the hooker who runs the sort of swinger party, Joni Pratt,
played by Randy Brooks.
Yeah,
yes.
and then he sleeps with Joni Pratt, and we find out that someone's watching them, and later on, that the right to life cop is showing him the picture and going, "Look at this. What do you think this is?" And Floyd Hopkins is going, "What do you think it is? It's me having sex with this woman." He's just completely shameless.
When he brings Leslie Warren to the party, Charles Durning's party, and Charles Durning's wife is just like aghast. What are you doing? You're a married, she doesn't say this. She's just all in her face. Like, you're a married man and you're bringing this woman here to our party. Well, it looks like a Thanksgiving party practically, because Durning's carving that turkey. And Charles Durning has this great little aside where he just looks at his wife and it's like, shakes his hand, moves his hand back and forth, like, let it go. Don't say a word. He probably does that every day at work. Like telling, to other cops, to Raymond Barrier's character, just like, I'll get it. I'll deal with him. He's mine. He's my son, in quotes, son. Yeah, he definitely is the dad character, but James Woods is like the uncontrollable kid, basically. It's like he's going to do the opposite of what his parents say until he needs to be bailed out. And then it's like, hey, Dad, bail me out. I need your help. That's exactly what the relationship is like.
Yeah, and Dutch is there for him every single time. I found it interesting, though, that they changed what happens at that party from the book to the movie. And we'll definitely talk a little bit more about the book/movie stuff. But in the book, I think it's Dutch has gotten a promotion and, right, he got a promotion and then he's going to be not in that same position to help out Lloyd. And Lloyd calls him Judas and slaps him in the face in front of everyone. And somehow I think that's what starts the IA investigation of him and gets him suspended and puts him, even more on the outs with the law. Whereas with this one, he's just talking about what a needle dick the Raymond J. Barry character is and turns around and there he is. And that's what gets him in trouble. And I'm just like, wow, I would think like the slap of Dutch in front of everyone is much more egregious than just like making fun of your boss. He's right behind me, isn't he?
Audiences loved Charles Durning. Even as a kid, I loved Charles Durning. I don't think you could get away with that in this movie. I can see why James Harris changed it, assuming it was Harris that did so. But it's just like, a bridge too far for a main.
And Dutch still wants to help him out. I mean, Dutch is really the savior in the book that comes along out of pretty much nowhere and figures out what Lloyd is doing. Because in the book, again, sorry to go back to it, but it's the whole thing with the tape recorder that he finds outside of Whitey's place. And that tape recorder becomes that major piece of evidence because it's such a specialized machine that only 21 have been sold around Los Angeles for the last however many years. And it was only made for 1 year kind of thing. So, they're able to track down who owns that stuff. And the whole thing is after Lloyd has already figured out who the killer is, then Dutch has to follow in his footsteps and start making those same calls as to who owned this or who bought this tape recorder. But in this, it doesn't work that way at all.
Woods finds real player in the bushes. Well, not really bushes, but on the wall outside. And I'm thinking, man, someone has to switch out those reels, that reel-to-reel tape player. I don't know how often, but that'd be tough.
Rod, sometimes you just got to let art flow over you. You know what I mean? And I think this is why I think it's the best, it's the most faithful Ellroy adaptation, because if you really forensically read up until the last three, which I haven't read, but I've read every single other thing that Ellroy wrote, and I read the Floyd Hopkins, the three Floyd Hopkins novels. I think I've read them 2 or 3 times in the past. You can start to pick Ellroy apart easily. I mean, it doesn't, but it's just that frenetic pace, the dialogue, the narrative pounding that this, that Ellroy achieves, all that stuff just gets flicked aside.
Shortcuts the story. It just keeps moving along.
I mean, you don't have time to think about, that didn't make a great deal of sense. How did that work? It's on to the next thing, on to the next Floyd Hopkins atrocity, on to the next woman that Floyd is seducing, on to the next drama, on to the next argument,
Yeah, it really stuck out to me this time because I never questioned it before, but I think with today's technology, and if a teenager was to watch this today, they probably wouldn't even know what a reel-to-reel player is. They might not know. So it really sticks out today. It's so analog, but I wouldn't change it. I still love it.
Ellroy sets it up in the book about that tape recorder. He says that it is such a model that it doesn't require, I think it could record for a ton of hours. I want to say it switched out different tapes and things. And it also it's activated with Whitey's door. So it only turns on once the door is closed. So it was very much just it wasn't voice activated. I don't know if we had that technology at that time, but it was such that it would only record when he got home from work kind of thing. So Ellroy sets up this whole thing with this tape recorder that has, such a long length to it. But then the killer comes back the next day and finds that the recorder is gone. He's just like, "Wah!" And it's no, he only recorded 4 hours worth of stuff on this tape. He shouldn't have been back the next day. So it was odd. But the book definitely goes back and forth between Hopkins and Teddy, just back and forth, back and forth. And I know he's not Teddy in the movie. He's Bobby Franco, I think is his name. So he just goes back and forth between those two. And it's interesting because you look at other cop thrillers at the time and you think about like, how often do we see the killer? And we see those killers in different amounts in all of these kind of films. And the few of them that stuck out to me were things like The Hero and the Terror, where the terror is actually like double, second build kind of thing. Or you get like, Nighthawks, where you've got, it was Nighthawks, right? With, Rutger Hauer as the bad guy in that. Sylvester Stallone and Billy D. Williams. Yeah. So it's like, we follow these killers, but in this one, other than, and you don't know it at the time unless you're really paying attention, other than the guy who's at the post office watching Lloyd when he meets up with Joni, you don't see the bad guy until right towards the end. And there was a scene where he takes out Birdman, but apparently Harris was so displeased. Now, this is the story that Harris tells on the audio commentary. So Harris says that he was not really happy with the quality of acting from the guy who was a stuntman. And by the way, he was the same stuntman who Arnold Schwarzenegger uses as a human shield in Total Recall in that escalator scene, which I just fucking love. And he's actor / stuntman and a few other things. And he didn't like the performance, so he just cut out that scene. So we really don't see him until the very freaking end of the movie. And I always wondered if that robbed this movie of something, or if it's better that we just stay with Woods, because I'm trying to think of any scenes where Woods isn't present, and I have a hard time thinking about that. I can't think of any place where we don't see him.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That was what stuck out to me reading the book, was it's like 50-50, essentially. I mean, between Teddy and Lloyd. But the movie's not like that, and I'm glad it becomes Lloyd's story. Changes have to be made in adapting for film. Completely different. I don't think it would have worked because Teddy's story is, I don't know, it makes this more of a mystery, which I like. Teddy's story in the book it's a repeating of a lot of the same type of thing. Although it would be interesting to see him stalk the women and how he does it sort of as a procedural. I do like the fact that that he's sort of sidelined until the very end. And it's more of a mystery of like, who the hell is doing this and why? It does help the suspense a bit.
Well, then it makes you also wonder, is it Charles Hayde? Is it even Leslie Ann Warren at one point? I'm thinking, like very briefly, I'm thinking about Leslie Ann Warren.
Oh, I agree. I remember the first time it was very much like every one of these people could be a red herring. You just didn't know. And it's always good when you cannot figure out, when a movie is able to not trick you necessarily, but be way ahead of you. That's always a good thing in my book.
Yeah, I thought Charles Hayde, definitely. Who I think the first 2 or 3 times I saw this film, I thought Charles Hayde's character, because I think Sheriff Dilbert Whitey Haynes is just a terrible person, just a dreadful, slightly pasty, overweight Hollywood sheriff who's obviously so corrupt. I thought that was the same guy who played Ralph in Happy Days for about the first 3 times that I saw this film, and then I looked it up and went, oh, God, because they kind of have a similarity. They kind of look a bit the same, and I thought that would be actually very cool if that was the case, but obviously it wasn't. I thought that Whitey Haynes was definitely, and as it is, he is completely suspect. He's shaking down male prostitutes and running drugs, so,
I love in his apartment the bustin' ass poster that he has up on his wall. It's just basically a woman's butt in a thong, and I think you see a police badge. And yeah, bustin' ass. It's classy. He didn't frame it.
People who read the book would know that it definitely wasn't him, because he and Birdman are the two that, again in the book, rape Teddy. So rather than them raping Kathy in this one, and that's an interesting thing. Well, obviously, very, very different motivation for Teddy, having been raped by these two. And that really sets him off on this whole psychotic journey of protecting Catherine and going after women that reminded him of her court that she had when she was in high school. And that sets up a parallel that we also don't get, where we have Teddy being raped when he was, 18, 17, something like that. And then you've got Lloyd being raped when he is 8, I think it is.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, so we have this whole thing. And then what's interesting, too, is that his mother, Lloyd Hopkins' mother, is the one who finds out who raped you. He can't even say it. He has to write it down. She takes that information, finds out that it was a guy from the neighborhood who is shell-shocked from either, must have been World War II or maybe Korea. And because this is happening, well, I guess in the late 50s it is. So she is the one that employs vigilante justice. Lloyd follows her to the Silver Lake power plant, and she kills this guy, puts 6 bullets into this shell-shocked veteran. And that weird thing that Lloyd says, when they got home, she gave him her breast and lets him sleep with her that night. This weird maternal thing that's going on with that, which is absolutely wild. And then where does the book end up? The book ends up at the Silver Lake power plant, taking all of this stuff back to the beginning where Teddy and Lloyd face off. And it's like, who can survive their trauma? Lloyd survives pretty well, except that he can't handle music, because music and TV, all of these things were turned on inside of the work shed where he was tied up after his brother tied him up. And I was glad that we don't have the brother, we don't have the parents, we don't have any of that stuff. I mean, Harris just strips down that narrative, and I think making Catherine the rape victim rather than our killer. But I mean, God, again, what an amazing motivator to have this killer be raped by these guys. And I love that whole attack of him in the book where I think Whitey goes to piss on him and finds out that he's hard, and then ends up raping the guy, and then has Birdman rape him as well. And then we see Birdman so many years later as this street hustler, and it's just like how this whole incident has affected his life.
Well, Kathy's clown plays, and like you'll never hear a song the same way again.
Yeah, and then doesn't he write on the wall in blood at the end rather than Let's Go Victors or whatever it is? Doesn't he write I am not Kathy's clown?
I don't remember that. It's possible.
Yeah, that's what really tips Lloyd off, is he goes back to the yearbook. I mean, that yearbook and this whole high school trauma. It's like I always say, so much trauma comes from high school. Comes out in different ways, I suppose.
Well, and that's where in the movie, it's at a school, right? They meet at the end.
That's where the finale is, yeah.
That to me is interesting, that you get that shift away from the book, like all the stuff that happened in school to Teddy. Now, in the movie, Teddy, or now Bobby, inflicted that upon Leslie Ann Warren's character at school. So that's where it ends here. It's interesting. I like it. I mean, I'm always intrigued just visually of empty schools at night. For some reason, it always works.
It's like the finale of LA Confidential taking place at the Victory Hotel, where it's, a lot of bad stuff happened here. He might as well say that as he's going back to that high school. A lot of bad stuff happened here.
Is it too early to talk about that last line right now?
No, I think it's always a good time to talk about that last line.
Like, I don't know. I don't want to ruin it for those who haven't seen it, but what I remember from seeing the film the first time in the theaters is an audience not sure how to react to that line, because it goes from that to black as he cocks the gun. It's like a perfect edit.
Well,
what?
Aren't you going to read me my rights? Cuff me? Take me into custody?
Why, so you can sit in a nice, comfortable cell? Let your smart-ass lawyer cop an insanity plea? Is that the idea?
What's it to you, Hopkins? You're a cop. You got to take me in.
Well, there's some good news and there's some bad news. The good news is you're right, I'm a cop and I got to take you in. The bad news is I've been suspended and I don't give a fuck.
And it just kind of floors you. And I think today people might clap at something like that, but back then it was dead silent. No one knew what to do with it. I didn't know how to react to it, although I thought it was definitely interesting because I'd never seen a movie in that way before. I think when you talk about this movie today, those who have seen it remember that a lot. If more people had seen it, you would see Cop talked about on the best last scenes, best last shots, best last lines, whatever. All those lists that get done on the internet. I definitely think Cop would be on there a lot more.
And it's amazing to hear Harris talk about that in that commentary, and that it doesn't sound like it was made up on the spot, because there is some of that in the script, but they definitely changed the way that the script ended. Basically, the movie was supposed to end with them finding Teddy/Bobby hung up by one leg, very much like the original victim that we saw. And then there's a title card that explains what happens to everybody after the end of the movie, which is wild to me that they would go that far and have Lloyd having murdered the guy the same way. So the title card appears and it says, Lloyd Hopkins was suspended without pay for 1 year pending a hearing at that time. He is presently looking for work in the San Francisco area. Janice Hopkins is suing for divorce and has plans to marry Bernard Plotkin, a Marin County psychotherapist. Arthur Dutch Peltz was promoted to commander in the Internal Affairs Division, reporting directly to Commander Fred Gaffney. Ms. Kathleen McCarthy, which is nice that they kept the Ms., sold her bookstore and now lives with Thelma Teddy Bailey, a Los Angeles Silver Liberties attorney. So they kept the Teddy in there, but changed it to the name of the woman that she's now living/sleeping with.
So she's shacked up with the lawyer that represents her with Dutch. And she's that woman who's sitting there. Yeah, wasn't the problem one of the many problems with the making of this film is that the studio wanted a Dirty Harry film?
Well, that last line is very Dirty Harry.
Yeah, well, exactly, and so they got that. But it's thinking about it. They were worried because it's kind of it's almost like a slasher film in some respects. And in some respects, just thinking about it now, it's also kind of arguably could be put in that small group of American films which you would call American giallos as well. It's actually, now that I think about it, it actually has a lot of things in common with that very small sort of body of film. So, I mean, yeah, it's more dirty. It ended up being more Dirty Harry than it did being, but it combines that sort of slasher thing. It combines giallo elements. There's all kinds of things in this. It's quite a sort of narratively sophisticated film as well as having real pace.
By studio, do you mean the Atlantic Releasing Group that put it out? There were so many indie labels in the 80s that were putting out movies like Wide. And they had, I guess their biggest hit was Teen Wolf, but they did like the Garbage Pail Kids movie. I remember seeing their logo on Paul Schrader's Patty Hearst, Night of the Comet, Steel Justice with Marvin Cove. They had like a Smurfs cartoon back in the 80s. And it's just a strange time where, Atlantic, they didn't last much longer than this to be.
According to Harris, this was one of the last 3 movies that Atlantic put out. He was talking about how Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs up, and he was like, oh, great, put it out on the poster. And they're like, we don't have money to rerun these posters.
I remember I saw this movie because of Siskel and Ebert's review. Back then, I worship Siskel and Ebert. I grew up on their show, and I learned a lot from those guys. And this was one where I was like, yeah, I like it. I don't love it, but I'm glad I went to see it. Yeah, I definitely do remember that review because it got me in the seat.
Yeah, I was just looking up to see what else that they did. Well, they did Valley Girl, Night of the Comet, Extremities even. That was a rough one.
Well, you know how Roger Corman would import foreign films and stuff? Yes, Cannon did that as well, too, before making the move more towards just exploitation. They'd been around a while. Back in the 80s when VHS hit, there were a ton of those labels. Every week there'd be things opening up from these little shingles. It was quite a time. You had your pick. Every week of many, many, many films.
Well, there was all that money sloshing around too. Which,
there was that. Yeah, that's a good point.
They'd say, we're making a movie. Yeah, do you want to invest? I mean, that's partly what's driving a lot of those little sort of small labels that are putting out really interesting stuff like this.
speaking of Dirty Harry, this movie reminded me a lot of Tightrope, the Clint Eastwood movie.
Which is another American giallo.
Very sleazy, has the Pervo serial killer, and actually, now that I remember, Randy Brooks is in it as eye candy again. But yeah, it plays like that.
Is that the one with the horror? Is that the one where people are killing people on the horror film or something like? There's a horror film being.
I think you're thinking of Deadpool.
I'm thinking of Deadpool. Sorry, yeah, I get that late Clint Eastwood. I get that Clint Eastwood cop phase mixed up a bit because
But the killer, when he kills Randy Brooks, I think it's like, I don't know if it's the opening of Tightrope, but it's soon into the beginning. He has this crazy like kabuki mask type thing on that's really chilling to look at. She like gets into a hot tub and is just soaking, like looks up or something and sees this face staring out of her. It's pretty chilling. But Randy Brooks, so I mentioned her earlier, as the woman who sets up these floating swingers parties with realtors she knows. That line to me is funny because she left acting to become a realtor. So I wonder if maybe she sets those things up now. I'm just kidding. She doesn't, I'm sure.
That you know of.
That I know of. But the scene in the book where he goes with her to the next swinger party, which I think is that night. He says, when's your next one? I'm going as your date. And so he goes there, gives a brief speech at the beginning, like, hey, you guys have fun. I'm going to go upstairs and lay down. And then he goes upstairs and lays down, like looks through, evidence or whatever. And then as he comes down to leave, like all the music is blaring and he has like this kind of a anxiety attack, I guess, of sorts, which ties back to the trauma that Mike was talking about. I'm glad they cut that because it would have been weird.
But in the book, that's a chance for Ellroy to chuck in a bit of his swinger club. It's a bit of a swinger experience from the late 1970s,
One of the things that he had in the book was where Teddy's Verplank, I think is the last name in the book, which I could see why they changed it to Bobby Franco, works at a porno bookstore, and which Ellroy did for a brief time before he became James Ellroy. But that, again, that the book gets, and I don't remember if I'm reading this in Blood on the Moon as was published or the LA Death Trip version. Like it's really explicit about one of the encounters he has at the bookstore at like 3 a.m. when he comes upon this guy, don't read into that, enjoying himself.
That is definitely in Blood on the Moon.
This movie could have been a lot nastier.
Which is saying something.
Which is saying something. Because it probably, I don't remember what else was out that year that was like causing controversy. Not that this did, because it wasn't a blockbuster. It wasn't a studio project so much, but that would have made some headlines, which actually would have probably helped the box office.
They really toned down the homosexuality of the characters and just they erased it. Yes.
Yeah.
Those very heterosexual posters in Whitey's room. I mean, he does have those very nice padded leather cuffs. I mean, you are not going to get any sort of marks on your wrist having that. I mean, that's a lot of padding in there. So
isn't there a box of dildos as well? I think that, or am I imagining that? Am I projecting that?
I don't remember if that's the case, but I know that, they definitely take out the whole thing where part of Birdman's job is to basically take care of Whitey every single time that he sees him. And really just remove that whole homosexual angle altogether. And then Teddy / Bobby, I don't think that he's being portrayed, even though he's very lithe and everything. I don't think that he's being portrayed as gay either, which is ironic because you're talking about controversy, and 3 years later, we're going to have Silence of the Lambs, which just gets a ton of controversy with the Jamie Gumb, James Grant character.
And this was a time where AIDS was still a public menace, basically something to fear with all the, fake stories going around about how you could catch it. And there are a lot of movies where the homosexual is the villain. And so it is kind of surprising just that all that is erased because it was par for the course back then, I guess.
I wanted to talk about another Thomas Harris adaptation, to have Manhunter a few years before this and have the reason why he takes, I can't remember the reporter's name, but takes him out is because he printed that the tooth fairy was gay, and he doesn't
Which
like
they planted. They planted
yes
to flush out the tooth fairy.
Do you imply that I'm queer? God, no. Before me, you were a slug in the sun. You are privy to a great becoming, and you recognize nothing. You are an ant in the afterbirth.
And it works too well, almost. I mean, even the name Tooth Fairy, he doesn't like that either because it implies that he's gay as well.
There's another in the book, going back to the homosexuality of the characters, where Lloyd Hopkins is looking in a car or something, and a black guy is getting serviced, and he's sort of comparing his own penis to his and wondering why he doesn't get blowjobs like this fat guy does, and starts thinking about why his wife doesn't do that anymore. And it's just sort of this weird, twisted, it's like he's partly admiring the guy while also despising him.
Yeah, he really wants his wife to give him a blowjob, and she will not do that. And I remember that line about how, would she take him in her mouth at some point? And I was just like, well, this is really odd. Like, he was so happy when he passed the detective's exam or whatever, and he was just like, oh, for sure Janice is going to give me a blowjob tonight, but nope, doesn't do that. And her whole thing too, because she leaves him very early in the movie. It goes on for a little bit longer in the book. And who does she go out with? She's got this gay friend, George. And it feels like, well, that's okay that she's hanging out with this gay guy because he's not a sexual threat in this world. And like, he kind of gives that a pass. And he's the one, like, she actually moves out and moves in, I believe, with George and a friend of his. And then to have this whole thing of like how she moves to San Francisco is kind of like a coding for that.
Can't really say that gay people, queer people ever got a good run in any Ellroy book, though. You know what I mean? No, so just to say the least,
You think about that Simon Baker character from L.A. Confidential.
Yeah, that's right.
Gets his throat slit.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, God, there's innumerable fruit hustlers and rent boys and who always end up on the sort of killer's slab at some point or another. Collateral damage for what's going on.
I was just surprised that nobody's a shitbird in this movie.
Floyd is a cunt hound, as Dutch says at one point. I think that's,
Elroy definitely has his turns of phrase, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
He does. He sure does. The Leslie Ann Warren character, we mentioned the yearbook and how she wouldn't really have that on her table if she hated high school so much, didn't even want to think about it. But at the end, and I did not remember this from previous viewings, is that she calls Bobby Franco to give him a heads up that they're suspecting him of being a killer. And James Woods runs after her. She's calling from the payphone outside the police station, and he's screaming at her like, why would you do that? And I'm thinking the same thing. Why would you do that? And her reasoning is,
I thought he was innocent. I thought you would persecute what I thought was a talented and sensitive boy.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
She seems smarter than that, even though she's played as kind of this woo-woo. She probably is like into crystals and things like that, even though they don't talk about that. Like just a weird character with her head in the clouds. But I don't know why she would do that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, she does the same thing in the book, but he doesn't know about it, I don't think, or at least he doesn't know about it at first. And she directly is the one that gets Janice killed, because when she puts Teddy in the book onto Hopkins, he starts following Hopkins. Hopkins goes to visit Joni and comes out, and next thing you know, there's a knock at the door. She thinks that Lloyd is back. No, it's Teddy, and he massacres her. And luckily, Catherine is smart enough in the book to realize, oh, I was the one that caused that. If I had not called him, that woman would still be alive. And that guilt haunts her for the rest of the book, and she ends up leaving Lloyd at the end of the book, even though it seems like they're going to be together, she ends up leaving and is like, I can't handle this guilt, and seeing you every single day is just making it worse. Again, the kind of sins of the past. I mean, so much of Ellroy's work, too, is just sins of the past. And I think Leslie Ann Warren really works in this role for me because she's got that voice, that little girl voice that she does, and she just seems like a damaged little girl. She seems like mentally, at times, the same age as Penny, the daughter. She didn't have a daddy who told her stories to prepare her for the real world. So when she saw how awful the real world is, she didn't know how to handle it.
I thought about that actually as she goes to smoke a joint and take a bath before they are supposed to make love or have sex. I guess she does call it make love. And she's talking about it like, kind of like a kid would. Are we about to make love? She goes sort of flighty and does this like little boop thing with her finger and half dances out of the room. It is kind of a child. She acts like a child. You're right.
It's Ellroy's cliche of a feminist, though. What it is. It's Ellroy paying out on all the feminist women that he either did or didn't sleep with in LA in the sort of late 70s and 80s. And complete with when they find that, what's that book when he finds the body of Julianne Niemeyer.
Rage from the Womb.
Rage from the Womb by Pamela Van Dyke. There's other bits, though, that sort of work in the film. I do like a good piece of analog police work. And I think that scene where he's pulled all the files and he stays up all night going through the files and he's going, no, too black, too young, not innocent, talk to me. I just think that's that's actually quite believable. That's quite a good scene, I think. And, his police work scenes are terrific. I mean, when Floyd first confronts Whitey about, and he just sits him down at the table, he's eating pie and he hardly says anything. And the Delbert Whitey Haynes character, fills the silence by talking him and kind of incriminating himself a bit. I think things like that are really, really good. There's some good analog police action in this film, which is Ellroy's forte in the books, I think.
Hopkins says to Whitey, when he's talking about working like West Hollywood or something, he calls it, I think, a fat sewer, just to like throw Whitey off of his game a little bit. In the book, it has more impact since Whitey is engaging in some of this stuff, but it really tips him off to the whole Birdman hustler aspect of it. And I really kind of wish we had a little bit more of the Birdman in there, just because I like the actor that played him, that, speaking of pockmarked, but that guy from Grease, that I love when people take pictures from Grease and they're just like, these people are supposed to be in high school. And like Dennis Stewart is probably the least I look like I'm in high school of all of them. I think he was 30 when they were shooting that. And I always liked when he would show up and stuff because he just had a great look.
I forgot he was in Grease. I totally forgot that. Yeah, and Annie McEnroe is in this. Barely. And I didn't recognize her. Raymond J. Barry, I didn't recognize until this time because I wasn't familiar with him in viewings before. After Justified, the Elmore Leonard series, like you can't not think of, like you can't not remember who that guy is anytime he shows up. It is good, but to go back to Andrew's point, like 85% of the movie is casting. This is a really well cast movie. There's so many good people. I will include Randy Brooks in here because she's always, the like Man with Two Brains or Hamburger, the motion picture. She's the ditz. She's the blonde ditz, who's going to get naked. And here she doesn't get naked and she's not a ditz and she's good. She actually acts and she didn't get that many opportunities like that. She was always eye candy or sometimes just scenery. Like she's in William Friedkin's Deal of the Century, not even has any lines, just like is in a bikini on stage, but she's really good. I think she's fine.
I think she's really good. Yeah. And yeah, I'm used to her playing the ditz. So when she's got her shit together in this movie, I'm like, okay, that's great. And it does make me very sad when we see her strung up in that same position that she was in while she was having sex in that crime scene. That's a very disturbing moment.
In the book, in that scene where, not the one where she dies, but where they're having sex and she has this, she's really turned on by the handcuffs, gets him to cuff her. Well, or I think they attempt to, or something to that effect. Goes on a lot longer, but then it does end in the same place with the door creaking, which I'm surprised they don't hear.
All that sizzling bacon. They've got their eyes on other things. Come on.
The movie itself, like, they didn't need to have, like, they put in the sound effect of the creaking door. You didn't need that sound effect. You could have just shown that door and you'd get it. Audiences are not always smart, but they're smart enough for things like that.
I was so happy when Dallas Novell asked for this for an episode. I was like, oh, cool. I'll get Ellroy back. I'll get Charles Hayde back. I'll get James B. Harris back. This will be fantastic. So Ellroy just won't respond to my emails right now. I don't know what's going on. Hayde, when I reached out to him, he said, I will not have anything to do with talking about James Woods or a James Woods movie. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think there's definitely either bad blood from the past or what Woods is today is affecting Hayde talking about this now. But luckily, James B. Harris agreed to come back and talk to me about this.
Did you try Randy Brooks, realtor?
I did try Randy Brooks. Never got any sort of response. I really wanted to. And I've had Leslie Ann Warren on the show, but that was set up through a press thing, so was unable to get in touch with her. I was beating the bushes. I really like this movie a lot and really wanted to give this a little bit more oomph, but at least we got James B. Harris, so.
I didn't listen to that interview deliberately because I just thought if I listen to the James B. Harris interview, it'll start changing what I'm going to think about the film and what I'm going to say about the film. So, guy's had an amazing career. I mean, not only the whole Kubrick connection, but I mean, Cop. And I don't know if you guys got to look. I mean, there was Cop. There was the Bedford Incident, which was his nuclear war thriller in 1965. And he did this amazing film in 1982 called Fast Walking, which also had Woods in it. I don't know if either of you have seen.
And Tim Carey.
Yeah.
Timothy Carey's in there, yeah.
Yeah. About a corrupt prison guard. Okay, that's a terrific film and also very dark and very sleazy. So, and then, of course, goes on to do, I think his last film is Boiling Point, which is, when was that? When was Boiling Point? 93, that's right.
That's it. It's like, why did he not direct more?
He did do bits and pieces. He did a sort of semi-porn film, some call it Loving.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that on the show before.
Yeah, well, that's the one film of his I haven't seen, but I have seen the Bedford Incident, which I think is great, and I've seen Fast Walking 3 or 4 times.
Well, that's just 5 movies. It's like, why did he not? I don't know that he has a definable style, but the scene that I thought was one of the best directed in this is when James Woods goes to Charles Hayde's Whitey's apartment, and he's just sitting there, and it cuts between like Woods just sitting and then what he's seeing, which is the wall with the door. And then every time it cuts back, which is not quick, but it has pace, has pauses. It gets in a little tighter to what he's seeing and a little tighter and a little tighter. And I could not figure out what is he trying to show us? You don't actually see until it gets like, you can see there's something above the door frame, but it's not until Woods gets up out of his seat and goes and moves it that you can tell it's a wire or a microphone, I guess, that leads to it. But the way that is framed, composed, cut is a really effective scene. I thought that was really well done.
I think Harris too. I mean, I'm not sure. Again, I deliberately didn't listen to the interview you did, Mike, because I just thought it would clear my pitch about a whole lot of things I might say or might not say about Cop. But I know that Harris basically says at one point, in terms of to your question, Rod, about why did he do so few films? He said, I preferred the kind of material and the kind of subjects that were not deemed or perceived as commercial. So it was almost impossible to raise money to do them. I was spoiled, I suppose, having worked on what I thought were very, important films. But, he also then went on his own and then had to raise the money. For these, Fast Walking is an incredibly non-commercial project. It's like Cop I suppose. It's like, it's a film that straddles about 3 or 4 genres. Boiling Point, maybe his most mainstream film. I don't know.
I'd say definitely the most mainstream, but even that wasn't a hit.
Absolutely not, because what's that, Wesley Snipes? Was it Wesley Snipes as a cop? And the studio wanted a Passenger 50, a sort of another version of Passenger 57, this sort of hard-charging Wesley Snipes as a kind of Dirty Harry type cop. And what they get is this weird character study about all these criminals gone wrong and ballroom dancing and a whole lot of other weird stuff that's in Boiling Point.
The poster for Boiling Point is extremely similar to Cops.
But the film is not. The film is totally very low-key, quite soft in parts, a strange kind of mixture of 93, so early 90s. It's kind of got 80s cop thriller tropes in it, but it's also a very strange film.
I'm gonna raise that one top of my list now that I've revisited, so I want to see that one.
Yeah, I don't think Boiling Point's a brilliant film, but I think it's an interesting film, and you can sort of see what Harris is trying to do. And there's lots of really interesting, full of great American character actors. So it's definitely worth seeing. I mean, the film I will watch again and again is Fast Walking. I think that's a fantastic film. I think that's probably my favorite Harris film.
After they did this, Harris actually did do a adaptation of Black Dahlia, and that would have been interesting to see. And then since he was involved in the project, he ended up with a executive producer credit on the Brian De Palma Black Dahlia. And I was glad that he had no qualms on the audio commentary for Cop, saying that he was a little disappointed, let's say, in Black Dahlia, because I very much am there with him.
I rewatched that recently after having seen it in the cinema when it came out. It's a terrible film. It's an atrocious film.
I'm glad that my memory is correct, because I have no desire to see it.
No. It just does not work in any way, shape, or form.
I love Brian De Palma, and I couldn't finish it. Like, it's just boring. It's dreadfully boring.
I just remember, because, we talked about doubling and the doubling of Hopkins and Teddy, and there's doubling that happens in the Black Dahlia, and that doubling is supposed to be between the Hilary Swank character and the Mia Kirshner character, Hilary playing Madeline Linscott and Mia Kirshner as the titular Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short. Hilary Swank says this line with a straight face, "Everyone says I look like her." And I'm just like, oh my God, honey, you look nothing like Mia Kirshner whatsoever. It was just so bad. I was like, really?
The Ellroy film that I do remember liking a lot, and I haven't had a chance to rewatch it because I'm living overseas and I haven't got all my stuff with me. I did like Brown's Requiem.
I do remember liking that one because that was Michael Rooker, right?
Yeah, Michael Rooker, and it's another Ellroy adaptation. And I do remember thinking, yeah, this is quite faithful to the original novel. I mean, was Brown's Requiem before the Floyd Hopkins? Was that one of Ellroy's earliest?
Brown's Requiem, yeah. I think it was Clandestine and Brown's Requiem were the first two.
The Floyd Hopkins film Cop came out, and then I think Brown's Requiem came out, and then LA Confidential. I do love LA Confidential. I think it's a terrific film, but it's a sort of cleaned up version of Ellroy's novel.
Yeah, and I think LA Confidential came out, and then Brown's Requiem, the movie, came out the next year, just because it had that little oomph from LA Confidential. Like, oh, cool, let's adapt more of this guy's work. And then the thing I didn't realize, because I knew that they had tried to adapt LA Confidential as a TV show way back in 2003, and I think
Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah, the Kiefer Sutherland one, and then I didn't realize that there was another one from 2019.
Was that Jordan Harper, the crime writer, who also did the script honors on that? And I've actually seen the first episode. They did do an episode. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, I didn't realize until I was interviewing Dominic Burgess, who played the Victor Buono character in Feud, that he had played Sid Hutchins in that new version of LA Confidential. But since that's from 2019, I don't think we're getting a series out of it, even though it's got a great cast. Walter Goggins as Jack Vincennes, pretty freaking awesome.
Well, it's one episode. They made one episode and then never went anywhere. But The episode is great.
Shea Wiggum. I love Shea Wiggum in everything. Yeah, I want to see that. I remember hearing a podcast with Jordan Harper. Can't remember what it was on, but they did talk about that LA Confidential pilot, and that it's probably, I think it's dead, which is a shame, because it could be a really good series for something like HBO. But I think the Kiefer Sutherland, if I recall, was for Fox, which would not have been good.
Just the way that Ellroy writes and just the disturbing content he gets into, you have to do this for cable. It cannot be for broadcast television. If you're going to do an Ellroy thing, I mean, he's got so many things. Like, had you said, okay, LA Confidential, but let's make a prequel. Let's go all the way back to Black Dahlia itself. Like, let's start there and just show this whole history of LA. I mean, because that's the thing that Ellroy does so well. And it could almost be like a Noah Hawley thing where it's like each season becomes a different book, or you do 2 seasons per book, because these are vast tapestries that Ellroy is creating. So speaking of, let's go ahead and take a break, and we're going to be back with that interview with James B. Harris, the writer-director of Cop, right after these brief messages.
Welcome to Heist Club,
where we lay out the blueprints for some of the strangest, boldest, and most unbelievable robberies of all time.
From mysteries unsolved,
to flawless plans,
to split-second mistakes.
Like the $19 million last job pulled off by London's very own version of The Expendables.
Or the robbery that made the Mona Lisa the most famous painting in the world. Like the Thomas Crown Affair, set in 1911 Paris.
But also less sophisticated. And no Pierce Brosnan.
Sorry, Todd. We cover bank jobs, art lifts, diamond scores, all the stuff Danny Ocean's crew would be jealous of.
I'm Todd.
And I'm Jesse.
Welcome to Heist Club, real-life capers that inspire movies, mysteries, and time in prison.
Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts.
And follow us at Heist Club Pod on all your social media apps, including Letterboxd.
Tell us about your favorite heists, what you would have done, hypothetically, of course.
Listen in and join the club.
Looking for something superior to streaming? A place with more than 5 times the selection available on all streaming services combined? Check out Scarecrow Video's Rent by Mail service. Select from an unparalleled collection of over 150,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door. Get in on it now at scarecrow.com and rediscover the wonders of physical media. So I understand you and James Woods have worked together on Fast Walking. And even before we talk about Cop, I'm so curious how Fast Walking came about.
I did a adaptation on a book called The Rap by a writer named Ernest Brawley. When Lorimar was in business at that time, doing feature films after they had done Dallas as a huge hit on television, and they wanted to go into the making of features. So I showed him my script on what I called Fast Walking, because he was a minor character in the novel, but I made him the major character because I just thought he was more interesting. And Lorimar loved the script, and we decided we had to find an actor. Jimmy Woods was starting to he had done the Holocaust TV show, and I don't know if he did The Onion Field yet, but he never had a lead in a picture. He's always a good supporting actor. So we decided to go after Woods, and he loved the script, and he and I got together to discuss it, and found out that that we had a lot of things in common, aside from movies. And we got along great, and it was really, it made it so much fun doing the film with him. You can always tell whether things work or not if they want to do a second picture with you, which turned out to be Cop. Not only did we work well together, but we became best friends. And to this day, we're still buddies and in touch with each other all the time. Just as an aside, he lives in Pacific Palisades, and strangely enough, his house survived. It has smoking damage, but all the houses next to him on both sides went down, and his survived. It's thank goodness, it's amazing. But anyway, we're still in touch. We're still buddies, and he's a great guy, as far as a friend is concerned.
you had such a stellar cast on Fast Walking. I mean, I love M.M. Walsh, Susan Tyrrell, Robert Hooks. I mean, just so many amazing character actors and just, straight actors. Just such a wonderful pool of talent.
Yeah, you're forgetting about the two maniacs, Tim Curry. Do you remember Timothy Carey from Pairs of Glory?
I love Timothy Carey, and I was definitely going to ask about him because I'm so curious what he was like to work with.
He's difficult to work with because he was a scene stealer. He loves to do things that were not in the rehearsals, and it always surprised us. All you need is one good take, and he looks terrific on the screen. He basically was a good guy. We used him in The Killing, Kubrick and I. We used him in Pairs of Glory, and then I gave him another shot in Fast Walking. And then the other guy, Tim McIntyre, he's another fun character. I mean, playing a scene with those two were really. It's really amazing. Yeah, I thought the same as you, that this was a terrific cast, starting with Woods and Tim McIntyre and Timothy Carey and Walsh and Kay Lenz and a few others. And what's his name? But all those guys were terrific. And we shot half the film in Deer Lodge, Montana at a vacated prison. And so we got the use of that prison as our set. And it just worked out fine. It was one of those pictures that didn't get a major distribution. Warner's has the picture now. Of course, they bought out Lorimar, and they have it in their buried treasure group of pictures. You could probably get it on Amazon or one of those things. That was the start of my relationship with Woods, and we had such a good time making it. We decided we wanted to do another one, and I came up with a James Ellroy book called Blood on the Moon. I adapted that, and the distributor was I forget who they were. They went bankrupt, whatever they were. The ones who financed the movie, and it was a shame. But this seemed like, I thought, really good movies at Fast Walking and Cop, and neither one of them got a proper distribution. The distributor for Cop went bankrupt. They didn't have enough money to even do television advertising, and how can you compete with all the other product on the market if you're not advertising on TV? They limited it to radio and news. I guess not even that. It's just the newspaper ads. The picture did well, and it opened in Los Angeles, and Westwood did fine. And it got great reviews. It was 2 thumbs up with Siskel and Ebert. Remember those guys? But yet, it's just one of those pictures that not too many people know about it. And Woods thinks of it as one of his best works. Yeah, we did it after he was nominated for Salvador. He didn't win the Academy Award, but he got nominated for Salvador. So he was starting to be known. And he's had a hell of a career. He's done some really good work. That had a good cast, too. Leslie Ann Warren and Charlie Durning. Charlie Hayde. It was fun working with those people. Movies are difficult to do. You have such great expectations before you start, and if you can get 80% of what you're dreaming about, you're lucky. You've got so many problems that develop, and that's why you do as much preparation as possible to try to deal with the problems are on the horizon, and they sure are. You're dealing with human beings, so actors sometimes are very cooperative, and sometimes they have other problems that interfere with their work, and you're trying to get a performance. And then you've got weather problems, you've got time restraints because you have a budget and a schedule. You have a completion bond, and those people are looking over your shoulder to make sure you don't go over time and over budget and over schedule. And you're so glad when it's over, and you just hope that you have at least 80% of what you had hoped you'd get. The Cop turned out okay. I mean, it was what really made a lot of people pay attention was that ending. If you remember, the ending was kind of a shock. We did that picture for under $3 million. It was really tough. You didn't want too many, take 5, take 6. you had to keep moving along and get it right. Casting is everything. You know, Kubrick and I always felt that casting was like 80% of the movie, because if you get the right actors, it requires less directing. The better the actor is, the less you have to direct, as long as they understand the script and they know what the scenes are about. And they can add things too. You just don't want an actor who just stands there and says, "Tell me what to do." They have ideas of their own. I mean, you as a director can always negate them. I mean, you always have final say when you're making the movie. But if you cast the right actors, it makes directing a lot easier than you think. And that's what it's all about. You know, for young filmmakers, they should watch a lot of movies and start to recognize the actors that are really good. And those are the ones you want to work with. You know, unless you're doing a documentary or an animated film, you need actors. You know, they're the ones that are going to tell you a story. You better get good ones, you know, good character, you know, good thinking people that can create for you. And I think I had that with Woods and Charlie Durning. He was terrific. And Leslie Ann Warren, you remember her in Victor Victoria? She got nominated for that.
When did you first encounter Blood on the Moon, and what about that story appealed to you and you said, oh, this is going to make a fantastic movie?
I'm always looking for what you call published material, you know. When I met Kubrick, we decided to become partners and make movies together. I told him that the one thing that I'm going to bring to the partnership is the wherewithal to acquire previously published material, because up to that point, Kubrick had only done, you know, 2 pictures that sort of looked like he made it up as he went along. What was so good about Kubrick's earlier works was not the pictures themselves, but the fact that he was so young and that he did everything himself. But the one thing he didn't have the wherewithal is to acquire material. You have to option it and then you have to buy it. And since then, since 1955, when we made our first picture together, Kubrick on his own or myself on our own or together, we never did a picture that wasn't based on previously published material. It really is, you know, again, advice to filmmakers, rather than make up your own stories, which are probably not anywhere as good as the novelist, just think, you know, the novelist did all the groundwork. He did all the heavy lifting for you. He made up the story. He made up all the characters. He did all the research on whatever the picture was about. And then you come along and all you have to do is, and I know it's not that easy, but all you have to do is decide what scenes, you know, you want to dramatize. Of course, you can't do the whole book. Usually they're 400 pages or so, but to try to do a 2-hour movie, you know, you have to be concerned about what's necessary to dramatize to tell your story. But anyway, getting back to the fact that I'm always looking for books in bookstores, and I subscribe to a service that gives you advanced reviews of books to be published. And I came across, in a bookstore, I came across Ellroy's, it's a trilogy. You know, he did, I forget what they're all called. What's his name? Lloyd Hopkins. There was the cop, over-the-top cop, you know, a cop who makes up his own rules and likes to settle things out of court. And I thought the character was terrific, and the story worked. Jimmy Ellroy never had anything made of his books, those 3, and I contacted him, and he was glad to sell me an option on Blood on the Moon, and we became good friends too, because he became probably the most known crime writer, you know, since the old days of Dashiell Hammett and all those guys, you know, James M. Cain. He had bestsellers, you know, like L.A. Confidential. Remember that one? You know, he won the Academy Award for my friend Curtis Hanson for writing the script. But anyway, I came across Blood on the Moon in the bookstore, and I thought, gee, if I can acquire this thing, I think I can make a good movie out of it. And when I did, I sat down and wrote the script and got back in touch with Jimmy Woods and said, you know, let's do this together. You know, we'll both produce it, and you star in it. I've written it, and I'll direct it, and that's what we did. We think, at least a lot of critics thought as well, that it turned out pretty good.
Obviously, the book goes in so many different directions, but you pare it down to just those essential facts that really keep a very tight, fast-moving story.
When you look at a lot of crime films, they kind of slow down the action with too much of personal things of asides with the characters. And they always put up a song that the girl has to sing in the nightclub or something. And it's, I just wanted to stay away from that. And I had already worked with Stanley, and we did The Killing. And The Killing was one of those pictures. What we loved about it was the way the story was told in a series of flashbacks, which just follows each participant in the robbery up until a certain point. It kind of set a whole standard for film noir in Hollywood, because Roger Corman, who made, low-budget pictures, they realized that you could make a low-budget picture that looked like an A-budget picture. The Killing, we used Lucian Ballard, who was a terrific cameraman, he was really well-known and well-respected. But, Kubrick, being a photographer himself, was able to use the right lenses and the right camera moves and everything. And we made a real low budget picture look like a major movie. We were talking about the pace and keeping it tight and getting rid of all the the unnecessary fat that you want to trim away. And that's what we did with Cop. We just kept it moving and told the story that people could understand, and get the right actors to play those characters, and that's a good recipe to make a movie.
Well, you mentioned some of the major players, but even some of the minor actors or minor characters, I should say, are so well done. I mean, Dennis Stewart or, even Stephen Lambert in there. I just love, Raymond J. Barry, who always brings so much to play, kind of a smallish role as that police captain, but oh my gosh, he just lights up the screen every time he's on.
Yeah, you remember he did a picture for Cimino. I think it was the Year of the Dragon or something in Chinatown in New York. And I saw Ray Barry in that, and I said, I got to, if ever I do a crime film, I got to get this guy in the film. He's just terrific. And so I wish the part had been bigger, but I figured Ray had to do that. I had to have him, and even the girl Brooks. Yeah, Randy Brooks. She was terrific in a real small part. That's the whole thing. I at the beginning of our conversation, I told you that Stanley and I really believe that casting is 80% of the movie, and you get the right people. It's such a good head start you have. You have to pay attention. Like a lot of directors, trust the casting director, and they don't pay enough attention to every little part because they think, well, it's only a small part, it's not that important. But every part's important, especially, you make one mistake in a movie and it can ruin it. If you pick the right people, even for those small parts, even in Fast Walking, there was minor parts like Charlie Weldon, I forget her first name. Weldon was a terrific singer. She was a recording artist and she was just great. But Charlie, he played the part great, and Hooks did, of course. Everybody in there was great. And as I said, the first time I directed a picture, it was called The Bedford Incident. I don't know if you ever saw that one. But, I had never directed a film before. Spending time with Kubrick, he makes it look easy, and it's not easy, but he also inspires you to want to direct yourself. And he was always pushing me because that's the most rewarding part of making a movie is directing. Because, when you look at the dailies or the rushes, that's what you see on the screen. You did that. As a director, you put it up there. And as a producer, I was fulfilled in that I had acquired all the material and made sure everything got made and ran interference for Kubrick. But I never felt that it was as rewarding as if I had directed the movies. So I got a shot to direct a picture. I found this book, The Bedford Incident. I didn't write the script myself this time. Had never written a script before. I'd worked on scripts with Stanley, but I got a good script, which of course, it's the old story. You can't make good mayonnaise with rotten eggs, and if you got a good screenplay, you're off to a real good start. If the screenplay is flawed, if doesn't work, you're not going to make a good movie. I mean, it's the blueprint of the movie, and it better be right. So anyway, but look at the actors that I had. Widmark was a pro that maybe had done 50 movies or something crazy like that. Porty had just won the Academy Award for Lilies of the Field. Then I had a great English actor named Eric Portman. And then I had James MacArthur. I had Wally Cox. I had Marty Balsam. He's always so good, and even Donald Sutherland had a small part in the Bedford incident. But the point I'm making is that these are all terrific actors, and I had never directed a film before. But the picture turned out like I was an old pro. And why? Because I had the good actors, and as I said before, the better the actor is, the less directing you have to do. All you have to do is have an ear, that can tell whether a scene plays or not. Pretty tough to say why it's not playing if it's not. Then you have to go back to Stanislavski and you got to say, first of all, does the actor understand the scene? Secondly, does he know his lines? If that proves to be positive, then you better look at the script and you better rewrite the scene. You have to have the ability to tell whether a scene plays or not. I don't think that's too tough when you got actors like I had. They make the scene play, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist if you got a good ear to tell that it doesn't sound amateurish. It doesn't sound like there's too much air between the responses back and forth. Plus the fact, you can make scenes work a lot in the editing room. You can tighten them up, you can loosen them up, you can change the pace, you can do a lot of things. But, if you have a good negative, you can make a good print. That in photography, so if you have a good script and you have good scenes that play, you don't have to do too much in the editing room except edit it properly. Listen, I'm making it sound a lot easier than it is, but you just have to have the right ingredients, and it starts with the script and the story and the actors. And
I wanted to know a little bit about some of the people behind the camera. Can you tell me about your DP, Steve Dubin? From what I understand, he wasn't the original DP on this, but he came in after just a few days.
That's right. Woods and I, screened a lot of stuff, and we really wanted to work with King Baggett, who photographed Fast Walking, but King wasn't available. A cameraman that had only done commercials, but the commercials were really fabulous. I mean, they were beautifully photographed, and we figured, Jesus, this guy really should do a feature film. I forget his name. He's really a nice guy, and he meant so well, but he was not used to doing feature films where you're on a schedule and a tight budget, and you got to keep moving, and you got to light the thing fast. And the first day we shot a scene, it was totally out of focus. So we had a follow focus guy that evidently screwed up on this thing, and we had to reshoot that stuff. Secondly, he really wasn't accustomed to working at the pace we needed. He was always trying to improve, always fussing with the adjustments and things, and he'd even be walking around while we're shooting. I mean, I remember a time when Woods was doing the scene, and this cameraman was walking around, looking at with his meter, looking at lights and things, and we stopped the take, and Woods had to tell this guy to sit down and stop moving around. He's becoming a distraction. We eventually had to let him go, and he understood that feature film was, especially a low budget film like Cop, was not in the same way of working as the commercials he had been doing. And then we got Steve Dubin, who was a real pro. This guy was, he worked fast. He got the job done. I remember when I showed the picture to Stanley Kubrick, he commented how he thought how good the photography was, and it was sort of Steve Dubin was not known, like the big boys, but he came through for us, and he was really terrific. I never heard of anything that Steve did after that. I just lost track of him, but I would certainly love to work with him again if I ever made another movie. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he even did some directing as well.
Oh, he did? Good for him. I didn't know that. And then we had a terrific art director, a production design guy. I can't remember his name. I mean, we're talking 1985, 86. What was tough about that movie is when we let the first cinematographer go, and we picked Steve Dubin. We had to go and look at all the locations again. The camera. You have to go out with a caravan usually with your sound guy, your cinematographer, maybe your art director, and look at all the locations to see what problems are in store for you. Do you want to gel the windows? Do you want to adjust the interior in any way? It was a nightmare of shooting your regular stuff, and then on lunch break, we had to go and look at locations in our future locations, so that the crew could because we have really a new crew. You've got a new cameraman and a new follow focus guy and a new operator. You have to go and take a look at the locations to see what is in store for you. Can you imagine, having to shoot scenes and then you only get a half hour lunch break, maybe a half hour to an hour. Then you got to get in the van and go and look at tomorrow's location to see what has to be done. Then come back and finish shooting the rest of the day. I think I must have lost 15 pounds on that move. So when you talk about behind the camera, then we had a good assistant director. They're important. Tell them what you want, and they have to get it done for you. They have to organize the extras, and you have to tell the extras what to do, what to wear. As a director, you get a million questions all the time. Everybody, all the department heads wants to know what you want so they can give it to you. And if you're going to have a day tomorrow is a day of, let's say you need 100 extras, they want to know, what ages, what are they black, are they white, are they female, are they male, are they high class, how do you want them dressed? And then you have to, where do you want them placed? The ones that look good to you should be near the camera because they'll be in focus. And the ones that you're not that happy with, you put them in the background because they're mostly out of focus. It's exhausting, directing a movie. It really is. I'd love to direct now, but I just don't think that I'd have the physical capabilities. I don't think I could be insured anymore. I'm 96 now. I'm 96. I don't think I'm insurable anymore. If it was so innovating when I was young, you can imagine what it'd be like to try to do it now. Because, there's a lot of nighttime shooting too. You've got these night shots, and you think you could sleep all day. You can't because you've got production problems to deal with during the day. So you get very little sleep, and you have to go to work when the sun comes down. You get the blue out of the sky so that you can start shooting. Man, it's a tough go. But I don't know. It's a disease you have. Once you get bitten by the bug, to be a filmmaker, Christ, it's hard to want to do anything else. I guess you've talked to enough of them to know it's a disease that is incurable.
You mentioned trying to keep the budget down, and you said it's a $3 million film. Did I read right that you and James Woods were working for scale and had to keep the budget down with the rest of the actors as well?
Yeah. The deal we made, it was because, they couldn't afford our real prices. So we made what you call an unadjusted gross deal, where we would get 10% of the unadjusted gross of the picture, and we would work for nothing. But because of the union, we'd have to at least get scale. So I got scale for, director scale, and Woods got actor scale. And we brought the picture in for under $3 million. But we thought we'd make an absolute, this would be, can you imagine having 10% of a gross? To gross $25 million around the world is not much of a gross. Some pictures do that in the first weekend, But let's say we grossed all in, $50 million, of which the distributor would get half, $25 million. We would get 10% of that with no adjustment. That's like $2.5 million that Jimmy and I could split up. But the company, Atlantic, that's the name of the company. They went bankrupt. And so our deal was a great deal on paper, but in practicality, they gave the film back to Woods and I. We own the film today, and we gave it to MGM to distribute. Not seen very much, and so, the whole idea of working for scale and making a low budget picture was to really, on the back end, make a lot of money. Talking about money, I can't be that serious because my first love really is to make the picture good. It's not, the truth be known, all of us filmmakers would work for nothing because we love making films. You keep it a secret that you would do that. You can negotiate your fair fee for doing it. So my first priority really is my first love is to make a good film. Secondly, it'd be nice to make some money with it as well. You don't make a film to make money. At least my kind of guys don't. Stanley and I, we never made pictures to make money. We made pictures to make movies, to make pictures as good as we could make them, and hope that we would make some money. You want success really, not to take vows, but you want success to make it easier to finance your next project, whatever it is. You know, the more successful you are, the easier it is to get a picture made. And that was always my trouble, is I made these pictures that for some reason they didn't, like Fast Walking, they get distributed. Some Call It Loving was independently distributed. Cop went down the drain with Atlantic when they went bankrupt. And, you never got the kind of recognition and the kind of success that would make it easier to get the next project made. I was lucky to get Boiling Point made, which was done in the early 90s. To answer your question, that's what the working for scale was all about.
I've had the pleasure of talking with Mr. Ellroy before. He's an interesting character, and I was curious as far as, you said that you're still friends with him, which is great.
Once I got to meet him, when I made a deal to acquire the film rights to Blood on the Moon through his agent, not Sobel in New York. But Ellroy came to L.A., and when he did, naturally we got together because I was the guy that was going to make a film of his book, and he had never had a film made of his book, of any of his books. So we had dinner together, and he was the kind of guy that was totally honest. He wasn't devious in any way. He was very helpful. He was appreciative, and we became really good friends. We spent a lot of fun times together. And if you've talked to him, he's quite a character. But the guy he speaks his mind. He's not afraid to say anything. He'll talk about his background as a vagrant. He got arrested. He was in jail. We used to kid about dine and dash. That he used to have a meal at a restaurant and then run before the check came. Waiters chasing him down the street. So he had, a real fun background. Then, of course, he wrote a book about his mother's murder. You know about that, where his mother had one night just been, I don't know what the circumstances were, but she was found dead, having been brutally killed. That was never solved. That murder. He tried to solve it, by working with a detective years after, and he wrote a book about it, but never got any satisfactory results from it. So he's had quite a background, and he used to caddy at the golf clubs here in Los Angeles before he wrote his first book. He's quite something, and I'm still friendly with him. He lives in Denver now, and we talk from time to time. I've always had an arrangement that I could do Because the Night, is one of those 3 books with Lloyd Hopkins. Since Jimmy Woods and I we own the Blood on the Moon cop film, that means that we also own the character of Lloyd Hopkins. Woods and I were actually talking about maybe doing a series with the Lloyd Hopkins being 40 years older. But the fire came along, and we've kind of started. We haven't talked about it for a while. Maybe we'll pick it up again at some point. That's if I'm still around.
I know that you're listed as a producer on Black Dahlia. Was there talk of you adapting Black Dahlia at some point?
Yeah, I made a deal after Cop, and since I was so friendly with Ellroy, at that time Ellroy needed a new car. I said, he said, I was interested in the Black Dahlia. He said, look, why don't you get me give me the money for a car, and that'll give you the option on the Black Dahlia. He said, I'll tell my agent, you call my agent and you make an offer. He'll of course think it's too little and everything, but he'll be obliged to ask his client, and I'll accept it. and he said, I'll accept the offer, and he says, we'll do it that way. So the next day I called up his agent, and I made an offer of $25,000 for, I guess it was a year, 18-month option on the Black Dahlia. He said, that's nowhere near what we would take for that. And I said, well, why don't you check it out with your client, and maybe. He called me back and he said, I don't understand this. He said, but he accepted. So we got to make a deal. So I made a deal, and I wrote it for Woods, I mean, I talked to Jimmy Woods about it. When he heard that I had acquired it, he wanted immediately to play the part of the cop. And so I sat down and I wrote the screenplay. But Woods got busy doing other things, and I made a deal with a German company, Capella Films. So I made a deal to direct the film, and the Boiling Point had become alive, and I had to do that first. I had such a bad experience with Warner Brothers and the French company, Canal Plus. Have you heard of that company? Canal Plus. They financed the Boiling Point, and they wanted to sell the picture to Warner Brothers. Now, Warner Brothers had a film with Wesley Snipes called Passenger 57, and it was a big success for them. And they wanted another Passenger 57 type movie with Wesley Snipes. So they were interested in buying the North American distribution rights for Canal Plus, but they wanted the editing to be changed so that it would be more of a action film, which is impossible. I did not plan on being an action film. It was more of a study about that there's a fine line. In fact, there's not much difference between the criminal and the cop as far as their private lives are concerned. They live the same kind of life. And so I did not have final cut on Boiling Point. And it was such an unpleasant experience to have to deal with, having my director's cut mishandled and misedited, which I had to do. I mean, if I quit and walked away, God knows what they would have done with it. So I at least stuck around to win some of the arguments. But what it did was it made me feel I never wanted to do another film, but I didn't have final cut. And I knew that my next scheduled picture would be The Black Dahlia, and Capella was making a deal with Universal at that time. And I know I could never get final cut from Universal. Only the absolute big top directors could get final cut. And so I decided that I just want to remove myself from that project. So they bought me out, and they gave me a producer, executive producer credit on the picture. I was not going to subject myself to another where some production executive at a studio can ruin your movie, can recut it or re-edit it because they think the previews didn't turn out as favorable as they had hoped. It's a tough go when you can't control, the final edit of your film. The Directors Guild, all the studios are signatories to that, so they have to abide by the contract. But the contract only provides 2 previews for the director of his cut. And once you've had the 2, whoever has final cut takes over, and you're finished. I didn't want to subject myself to that again, and so that was the story where that's why I got the credit. I got paid off pretty nicely to step away.
I would have loved to have seen what you could have done with Black Dahlia, because I was not very happy with the final product.
Man, you should have seen Ellroy. Talk about being unhappy. Ellroy and I went to the they had a special showing at the Academy Theater, the one on Wilshire Boulevard. Both of us were really disappointed. I mean, particularly Ellroy. I mean, he thought it was terrible. They didn't approach it the way that Ellroy and I and Woods would have done. It would have handled it differently. But they bounced around with a lot of directors. They finally wound up with De Palma. He had done some good work in his filmography. There were some good films that he had done, but he also, sometimes he really missed the mark, like on the Bonfire of the Vanities. You remember that one? And now Black Dahlia didn't turn out the way it should have either. But anyway, that was too bad, because it was a very interesting subject. Well, he's still doing it. He's still writing novels, and that's how he spends it. It's tough to see what the publishing and what book things are like nowadays, because Amazon has just put everybody out of business except maybe Barnes and Noble is the only one still going. But anyway, Ellroy's still writing those novels about L.A. in the 40s and stuff. That's his favorite subject. They become more convoluted. His earlier work was not as he calls dense. His once he got past I guess L.A. Confidential started to get really, and his style of writing is, you really have to pay attention, because a lot of times you can't, you can only read so many pages in a sitting. So you have to come back to it the next day. When stuff is that convoluted, stuff is tough to remember what you read the day before. So you look at Ellroy's works, and you have to really stay as focused, when you're reading that stuff to understand it all. But he's so clever and he's so talented. It's a pleasure to. I think I'm a lucky guy to. Just think of the people that I've got to work with, like Kubrick. For God's sake, he's probably one of the finest, best directors ever. And Ellroy, probably taking the place of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and James King and all those people. And then came Jim Thompson, who we worked with on The Killing in Pairs of Glory. And then Ellroy, you're talking about crime writers, but the best. Ellroy certainly is probably at the head of the group right now. It's probably a reason why they don't get made, into movies. It's probably much more of a novel and interesting than it would be. To try to find a way to tell a story in movie terms, there's just no question about his talent. That cannot be denied. And also, I don't know, maybe I'm a little weird or something, but I found him to be really, with all his eccentricities, he was a good friend. He was an interesting guy and fun to be with. And we used to spend a lot of time at the Pacific Dining Car, which went out of business recently, but that was a big popular restaurant in downtown LA. And he was married there, actually, at the Pacific Dining Car. And he was dressed, if you saw pictures of him when he was married, he was wearing a kilt, a Scottish kilt. So that gives you a little idea. Yeah, what a character to be wearing a kilt. But he's a winner for me. I'll have to talk to him, just to say hello at some point. But I can just hear him saying, he's the dog. He calls himself Dog. He's the dog of American literature.
Well, Mr. Harris, thank you so much. I really cannot tell you how much I appreciate you taking this time to talk to me tonight.
Call me Jimmy, not Mr.
Jimmy, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, well, it's fun for me too. I get a kick out of it. I hope there's an awful lot of stuff that you have to deal with.
We are back, and we are talking about Cop. And Rod, I believe you mentioned before the earlier version of Blood on the Moon, which was called L.A. Death Trip. And it was very interesting reading last night about why that book is the way that it is, and that this was Ellroy, having done those two books that you mentioned, Andrew, Clandestine and Brown's Requiem. He did that for, I think, Avon. And then he said either he lost his contract or he tried to sell LA Death Trip to them, and they said no fucking way. And he tried 17 different publishers to get LA Death Trip made before he ended up meeting with Mysterious Press. And Mysterious Press, Otto, and I can't remember the other guy's name, they were like, yeah, no, this isn't going to fly the way it is, but there is a book here. So let's try to get the book out of LA Death Trip, because man, oh man, 423 pages, and you can see the bones of Blood on the Moon inside of there, but it goes in a lot of other ways. So, Rod, it sounds like you read this one. Do you want to talk a little bit about your impressions of LA Death Trip?
I didn't really care for it because it is the bones are, the flesh that's on them is really similar to what we actually got in Blood on the Moon, but it is also different. It's like the same sort of things happen. They just are told differently or expanded upon in ways that, then were trimmed down. I somewhat confused the two. I don't remember exactly what I read from Death Trip versus Blood on the Moon, but I just remembered not really liking Death Trip. I'm having trouble putting it into words, but what's weird about that is both those books share some of the same dialogue that then Harris copies, pastes into his script for Cop. Like there are scenes where the dialogue is, if not 100%, 90% the same. Ellie Death Trip, it feels undisciplined. I didn't compare the page numbers to see how they work out that way. Like if one is considerably longer than the other, but it just seems to go on more tangents. I feel like I know I wouldn't have read another book in that series if it had come out.
Well, there was no Lloyd Hopkins to go back to.
That's the big change. He grenades himself to death, I guess.
Though he's trying to kill Dutch and all of the helicopter pilots and all of the cops, he's basically taking out innocent bystanders and victims at the end of the book. You're like, what are you doing, Lloyd? Like, he just wants to burn it all down. I know that Ellroy himself has talked about how the book ends with LA on fire. And I was like, well, not LA, like just around that power station at Silver Lake again. But yeah, it wasn't all of LA, though. You get that apocalypse more, I think, with the opening, well, one of the opening scenes with the Watts riot, which it's interesting how many books of Ellroy's begin with riots that happen in LA, because I want to say that LA Confidential starts, either LA Confidential or maybe Black Dahlia
I thought it was Black Dahlia. Black Dahlia, the two cop characters bond during the Zoot Suit riots.
So yeah, it's interesting how many of these books start with that. And it's not 2 guys that rape Teddy, it's 5 guys. So we kind of blow that out. And then we meet Catherine really early in the book.
Yeah, there's a lot of war stuff too, which I didn't think works very well. I don't know. It seems like a different genre. I generally don't like war stories in general. So I'm kind of maybe predisposed to disliking it, but I didn't feel like it added anything.
Well, that's interesting because that's also going back to LA Confidential, the whole thing of Exley in World War II. Like that's his secret shame of how he survived by pretending to be a dead body or like crawling under a whole heap of dead bodies. And that's how I think he ends up winning like the Medal of Honor or something because they think he's the hero of this battle, but he actually hid under all of these bodies. And that's the secret he carries around at all times.
I probably shouldn't have read both books the same day. They really do bleed together.
They do. Yeah.
Those details, like, yeah, the 5 guys versus 2. Those are the things that it didn't immediately come to mind until you mentioned it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
Including 2 beaners, as Ellroy would say. Jesus. You learn so many new racial epithets when you read James Ellroy books.
And also just sexual, like, wiener wagging and things like that.
I'm a big fan of the term fuckpad. That's my favourite Ellroy-esque term.
Whitey is introduced as an albino Robert Mitchum.
Right, yeah.
And again, I mean, Ellroy is almost a bit of a sort of bit more of a sad character now, I think. I mean, a bit of a talking wannabe headline, and he's got that film coming out, Ellroy versus LA, where I think is there any aspect of his life he hasn't dredged up for profit? But in obviously on the other side of it, the guy blew, incredibly hardworking, and blew a massive hole in the middle of what we thought crime fiction could be in the 1980s. And I mean, it's a function of the fact that he's so influential that he's never been cancelled, because he has influenced most major crime writers working today would have been influenced by Ellroy, and fair enough too. I mean, the guy, as I say, blew a massive hole in the middle of what we thought crime fiction could be.
Such a mythic figure. And it was surprising to me yesterday to realize this Cop came out in 1988, and he'd only been writing books for like less than a decade by then, I think, or at least published less than a decade. I mean, he hadn't been writing that long. He hadn't been a published author that long. And it just seems like he looms so large in the world of crime fiction and pop culture, as a whole, that he seems one of those guys to have been at it since the 50s. I mean, he's obviously not, he's not that age, but he seems like he should have been. Like it's just amazing to me that he wasn't. He's relatively new in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, Brown's Requiem came out in 1981. And I don't know if he made his bones doing short stories or not, because I know he's definitely done a lot of short stories.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, he was banging Brown's Requiem, Clandestine, as you said, and then those 3 Lloyd Hopkins books, none of which, that's 5 books, none of which did well. So he's also had a dream run too. He's also had a good run. I mean, most crime fiction authors today wouldn't be able to do, wouldn't be able to have 5 failed books and just keep on going, which is a problem with where crime fiction's at the moment.
I honestly don't think I've read any of his books since The Cold 6000 back in 2001. I mean, I've got Blood's a Rover. I can see it right here. And I can't, somebody gave that to me, or maybe the book committee sent it to me. But anyway, I've had that since 2009 and still haven't read that one. And
I did like Blood's a Rover, and I tried reading Perfidia. I think I got 100 pages into Perfidia, and I just thought, I can't. This is garbage. I don't like it. And I did read, what was the book that he did? Was it Sid Hutchins, the Hush Hush journalist? Widespread Panic.
Okay. Yeah, they call that the Fred Otash series.
It was Fred Otash. Sorry, it's not Sid Hutchins. It was Fred Otash. And again, I just thought, this is just a kind of a variation on a theme. I'm not really getting a lot out of this. So I haven't gone to any of his books. I haven't read any. I haven't read, was it After the Deluge or After the Fall or whatever, the sequel to Perfidia, and then there was another one after that. I haven't read any of those. And they're such big books that, you've really got to commit yourself.
The most recent one I read, which was over COVID, wasn't even a novel. It was his book Crime Wave, which is a collection of short stories and reporting, like I think specifically for it's either Esquire or GQ.
It was GQ.
Yeah, those are excellent. I think those articles are fantastic. The way he does journalism, it kind of gets to what you were saying, Andrew, earlier about the how he shows the procedural aspects of being a cop. I think I like how he approaches journalism too.
I mean, he's not the first crime writer to mine LA history for a crime fiction book, but the materials he was using, old cop files, old tabloid magazines, old pulp novels, retired cops. I think that was part of the innovation and that world he created from that was also part of his, innovation. I mean, everyone does that now, but I don't think so many people were doing it before Ellroy was doing it. I just wish he wasn't, to use his terminology, so much of a shitbird these days. Because, as I say, I want to be really clear. I love Ellroy. I mean, there's Ellroy books I will still reread. I've read The Big Nowhere at least 5 times, and I think it's, that's his Red Scare novel, his second book in the Quintet series. I just think he's brilliant, but I also think he's had a really good run, and he's, as I say, he had 5 really poorly selling books and he still kept getting opportunities. Then he had the Hollywood script writing gravy train, that's kind of dead now. And then he had the glossy magazine GQ sending him all over America to report on true crime stories. So he's also, none of those things exist anymore. And he's ridden every single one of those waves, and good on him. He's a hard worker, but I don't see him as some sort of outside demon dog. This persona that he cultivates now is kind of, annoying. I mean, the only outsider thing about him now is that everyone kind of knows he's a racist. I mean, that's...
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
I've interviewed him twice now, and both times it's just, he's so difficult, and he just is clinging to that persona the whole time that he just wants to be disagreeable. And it's like, can you just give me an interview? I am a fan of your work. I've been reading your work since the late 90s, if not earlier, and I really like what I'm reading and would love to talk to you about your stuff, but he just gets to be, I think I commented on your Instagram or Blue Sky the other day. It's like he's King Curmudgeon. He's just like the most curmudgeonly author that there is out there. And it's like, well, this doesn't do anything for me, and it doesn't feel like it's doing anything for you. So like, why are we even doing this? So I was kind of like, I would like to talk to you about Cop, but at the same time, you're just going to tell me how much you dislike adaptations of your work. It's the same thing.
And he's done well, and he's canon. So stop whinging, because really you are, and you've also managed to skirt a fairly nasty cancel. So, if we go back and read the stuff in your book, I mean, I'm not saying that he should be cancelled, but I was kind of waiting for it to happen. It never did, because the guy's so influential, and because all the crime writers who would potentially cancel him have also been influenced by him. So, I mean, the guy's so important in that crime fiction culture. I don't know what he thinks about the adaptation of Cop. I know he's bagged out LA Confidential,
which is crazy to me.
Yeah, insane, because it's such a, as you said, Rod, it's such a good film. I mean, I don't think it's really good.
It's not only that, I think I've seen it 3 times, and it's a movie that gets better.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, and you see echoes. I mean, watching Cop again a few months ago, before I interviewed Harris again, and the scene with Whitey comes up where he's playing Russian roulette, or, Hopkins is playing Russian roulette with him. Kind of. I mean, basically just holding a gun with one bullet in the chamber and pulling it, and my wife's like, is this an Ellroy adaptation? Because she's thinking of the scene with Bud White in the police department where he's doing that same thing with the black suspect. And I'm like, yeah, actually this is. So, and then it's funny in the book, I think Whitey says, oh, you had a blank in there, right? And it's like, yeah, no, Lloyd Hopkins does not play Russian roulette with blanks. Thank you very much. So, and instead of Hopkins shooting him, he basically says, like, your career's over, leaves the house, and then can hear a shot from inside the house, which is amazing restraint for an Ellroy passage.
You reminded me of the first scene of this movie, which plays out over the opening credits. Completely, like, we see nothing. It's just black screen. You see the titles and names and things, and it's a black guy calling an operator on a payphone to report the murder. And it's a recording, like, thank you for calling. And the guy keeps talking to it like it's a person. Oh, you're welcome. It's so insulting. the way that they play that. But also, it's been a while since I have even seen a payphone, but I didn't think you needed quarters to call the operator.
I don't think you do. Or to call 911.
But he did. That's another thing entirely. And that's not in the book. So that's purely a Harris invention.
It's more of a tweaker that calls them.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I also don't like how many scenes Harris puts in of Woods eating in this, because he's eating a lot. And one of them in particular, the sound is like upped, and you get a lot of mouth noise that's just disgusting.
Poor dietary choices too.
He eats more than Leslie Ann Warren smokes.
Oh boy, that's saying something.
A lot. I mean, James Woods does a lot of phone acting in this, where he's talking on the phone when no one else is on the other line. It's one of those things I would not have noticed before. I don't think he gives long enough pauses for, the other end to say what they should have said, but he's still pretty convincing at it. He does a fairly good job, but there are times though in this where he is so hammy. I think it comes through in particular on the one scene with his wife where they're arguing and he gives that speech that you read, Mike. He kind of overdoes it, I think, in that scene. But for the most part, I think like this is probably my favorite James Woods performance. Performance.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
It's definitely the one I've seen the most.
Watching Woods in this made me want to revisit Salvador, which is probably my favorite.
Well, and it made me want to watch. Like, I've never seen The Onion Field. And also to speak of another L.A. crime writer, Joseph Wambaugh.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I always think of that big serial killer from Mindhunter, Ed Kemper.
Do you know Joseph Wambaugh? Police Story? You ever watched that?
Huge fan.
Oh.
I got a lot of my insights right there.
Really?
I would not allow myself to walk into a trap because I knew exactly how their minds work from watching Wambaugh.
I forgot about that. He even mentions that. Seen that twice, that series twice, and I totally forgot about that.
Oh, I just love the end. That whole season with the BTK killer. That's so good.
Brr.
But we'll get another season of whatever, anytime. It's like, oh, please.
Oh, the last thing, and I wanted to ask you guys this. When James Woods and his daughter, the exchange they have, and they do give me 5 on the side, and I've never heard this part of it. Cut the pickle, you owe me a nickel. Have you ever heard that before? Other than this movie, I have never.
No, that's not a common saying in Australia.
No, I can't say I've ever heard of that. All right, let's go ahead and take another break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
Prepare yourself for the flight of your life as Republic Pictures brings you Stephen King's most startling nightmare, The Langoliers, now at a new low price.
It's coming! Don't you understand?
Stephen King's films have drawn more than $350 million in box office receipts, and his books have sold over 150 million copies worldwide. The Langoliers is intriguing, horrifying, and pure King, with plenty of scarifying King-style fun.
Langoliers are coming. They're coming for you.
Stephen King's The Langoliers. Now only $19.98 for each double cassette.
That's right. We'll be back next week with The Langoliers. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Andrew and Rod. So, Andrew, what is the latest with you, sir?
I have a project I'm working on at the moment, another book for PM Press, but I probably shouldn't say anything about it just yet. Kind of follow on from Revolution in 35mm, but different.
Yeah, whatever you write, I'll buy. So just keep writing.
Appreciate it.
And Rod, how about yourself?
Still flickattack.com with film reviews. The Flick Attack Movie Arsenal Book 1 still available, price to sell at Amazon.com. And soon, Flick Attack Movie Arsenal Book 2 will be out. I was hoping to have it by Christmas, but it's probably going to be more like spring of 2026.
This will come out the day before Thanksgiving because there's nothing better to talk about the day before Thanksgiving.
So on Thanksgiving, on Black Friday, you should go to Amazon.com and you could buy book 1. And it will still be under $20 for a huge phone book size compendium of reviews and articles, which Mike White graciously blurbed.
You're doing the Lord's work, Rod, so I appreciate everything.
So are you.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to support physical media and get great movies in the mail, head over to Scarecrow.com and try Scarecrow Video's incredible rent-by-mail service, the largest publicly accessible collection in the world. You'll find films there entirely unavailable elsewhere. Get what you want when you want it without the scrolling. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over this rotten, stinking world.
Don't want your love anymore. Don't want your kisses, that's for sure. I die each time I hear this sound. Here he comes, that's Kathy's clown. I've gotta stand tall. You know a man can crawl. But when he knows you tell lies. why he's not a man at all. Don't want your love anymore. Don't want your kisses, that's for sure. I die each time I hear this sound. Here he comes, that's Kathy's clown. When you see me shed a tear, and you know that it's sincere, don't you think it's kinda sad that you're treating me so bad? Or don't you even